immigration. There's no doubt about it. And we were very lucky in the past that both major parties kind of called it a draw of the apple on the other side. You know, but we didn't politicise race as much in Australia in the 70s and the 80s. It's not to say there wasn't racism in Australia, but major parties played a straighter bat in some of these things. So I think the media certainly have a part, the politicians have a part, and the public itself, you know, plays a role in these things. But I mean, I think back to the 2010 election, and I'd given a talk on why bringing 1 million people in every 4 years was putting pressure on infrastructure in Sydney. And my one-liner was that I thought we'd be ready for population growth when there were empty hospital beds and some spare seats on the train. You know, I wasn't for or against any particular population. I just thought build the infrastructure first. You know, bring the people in second. If you're going to invite everyone around to your house, you know, you usually get the seats and the food out before they arrive. You know, not after they've been there for 4 hours. I think we should be the same with population. So anyway, I gave this talk. Raved on about a whole bunch of stats in terms of infrastructure pressure, and this journalist came up to me afterwards and said that was really good. So so is that? Her words exactly right. She came up to me and she said that was really interesting. I'd never thought about the way that boat people were putting pressure on our infrastructure. You know, so, you know, I'll lay that one right at the feet of the media. I said, did you actually listen to a word I said? Remember the graph? You know, no. But, you know, she knew what her editor wanted to hear. You know, headline, boat people causing train delays. You know?
If the Australian public are all that decent and progressive that you say they are, how do you account for the popularity of people like Andrew Bolt and Jones, Ray Hadley, blah, blah, blah? I think Paul Barry said that Andrew Bolt was the most powerful and popular journalist in Australia.
Well, look, how do I account for it? Because you've got to look at these people, frankly, through their own prism, not through ours. Andrew Bolt talks about a fair go. Andrew Bolt, no, I'll stick with it. I'm not defending it. Understand why he is successful. He's interested in a fair go. He's interested in making sure, no, see, this is why you'll never beat him in a debate. He's interested in saying to a subset of the population, stick with me, it's all right. He's saying to a subset of the population, you deserve a fair go, you're the silent majority, and we all think, you know, fair is fair. I'm going to find ridiculous, trivial examples of where someone who's not you appears to have been advantaged in the slightest possible way, and I'm going to put such a big magnifying glass over that molehill that I'm going to turn it into a mountain, and then after I've distorted all perspective, I'm going to come back to you and say, are you shocked to learn, you know, that this unemployed person is living in 5-star luxury? And you're going to say yes. And so my point is, of course there are deeply conservative people in Australia who share little or no concern for their fellow man. Do these people exist? Yes. Am I sounding like Kevin Rudd again? Yes. Sorry, I'll let you go. So my point is that the skill of the clever conservative commentator is to choose exactly the right issue that takes a fair-minded person and makes them worry about the wrong thing. That is a skill that some people have.
I guess we probably disagree about the size of the subset.
Yeah, there's 23 million people in Australia. I assure you that Andrew Bolt's blog site is not that popular.
Well, do you know how big it is? Is it the majority?
A couple of 100,000, I think.
Well, I don't know.
Lot. What's Get Up got? 500,000?
More than any other political
More than any, 500,000 people more than are members of Get Up. You go find me a conservative group that's within cooee of that.
Well, Paul Barry has some credibility and he seems to...
I'm not saying Andrew Bolt's not powerful. I'm saying we need to understand his power. His power is the skill to distort people's attention and say, look over here, look over here. You know, that's different from the ability to command people to be conservative. Yeah.
You characterise the sort of the mood of the people as being interested in a fair go, but then the example you gave was more catering to people's selfishness. It's saying these people are you're disadvantaged. It's not two groups of people that you're separate from, it's you. So I guess I'm of the view of the lady over there, in that I don't think that the majority of Australians are interested in a fair go. They're interested in whatever advantages themselves.
Look, very good point. And again, this is my first outing for this argument, so I'm glad that I'm being challenged on it. To refine what I was trying to say, and you're right, you've drawn a distinction between supporting a great public health system because a great public health system is good for me, and supporting a great public health system because it's great for everybody. You are absolutely right. They are two entirely different motivations that can support the same end result. And you're right in your point. So I guess for me, I was working backwards from the policy solution, and I think you can get two different groups of people to agree with the same policy solution, you know, potentially by using different arguments for both of them. Whether you want a good public health system because you want to help someone else, or whether you want a good public health system because frankly it'll be far cheaper than health insurance, again, go look at America, you know, they are two quite different motivations for the same thing. So, yeah, look, I'll have a think about that, but I guess for me it doesn't change my major point. If Australia wanted to have, again, a world-class public health system, we could both afford it and most people would support it, even if some of the reasons that some people supported it was because that would be cheaper for them. But if I were to pick up any major newspaper in Australia, I'm not going to read that despite all of the angst over the private health insurance means testing, which I support, why can't we have a much more interesting conversation about, you know, the relative share of public expenditure and private expenditure on health in Australia? You know, we are again having a very big fight over a very small issue. You know, I mean, what percentage of people are going to get knocked off the rebate? Not many. Again, I support it, but that's not the main game. That's nothing like the biggest health issue in Australia. So yeah, no, good point. I take that on board, but I guess given that my interest is in solving what I think are good policy problems, I'm happy to conflate those two motivations. But yeah, we should certainly be honest with ourselves about it. Yeah.
Hi, Richard, how do we improve our democracy? How do we make it more democratic?
Oh man. The question, if you didn't hear, was a short one. How do we improve our democracy? Look, let's start with the most important thing. Ours is pretty good. It really is. I was asked after the Australia Day sort of incident what I thought about flag burning, and my answer was that I'm glad I live in a country where when someone burns a flag, we think they've gone way too far. Because let's be honest, there are countries where people go a lot further than burning flags when they've got political frustration. So I don't think that we've got anything like the worst democracy in the world, but I don't think we've got the best one. I think we often kid ourselves, and I think that it could be better. So I'm trying to think of the actual answer to your question by redefining it slightly. So how do we make it a bit better? Look, the political donation stuff would be a giant step in the right direction. I think there's no doubt that money in politics should have as little to do with each other as possible. But here's a radical proposal. I don't think anyone should be allowed to be in Parliament for more than 12 years. I think being a politician is a skill that few people comprehend, and the only way to have enormous amounts of that skill is to do it for very long periods of time, and the skill of being an excellent politician is unrelated to your ability to represent your electorate. It is unrelated to your vision for a better Australia. It is unrelated to almost anything other than your capacity to claw over your colleagues and divide and conquer. And so I think having people, and similarly, if I enter Parliament knowing at most I'll be there for 12 years, or pick any number you want, but a couple of elections. If I enter Parliament knowing I'm only here for 8 years or 12 years, and you say to me on day one, hey, suck it up, do exactly what I tell you to for the next 15 years, don't ever think for yourself or vote the way you feel, and one day all this could be yours, that's a rather unpersuasive offer if I know that I'm only here for a short period of time. And when do you expect politicians to cross the floor and do something interesting? When do you expect politicians to actually stand up and show some moral courage? Oh, you know, it's his last term and he's not up for pre-selection again. You know, so I think if people knew that they were there for a short time, then hopefully they could be there for a good time. And as I said, if the role of our politicians is to be our representative in our House of Representatives, it's not clear to me that after 25 years of being in Parliament House, you got better at understanding your electorate. What you did was get a lot better at shafting your colleagues.
But doesn't that work both ways?
Probably.
Like you've got politicians bought in America.
Yeah.
So if you're representing a corporation, you just go for it. You don't have to be re-elected.
Yeah, look, maybe, but I suppose you could argue that if people are only there for a short period of time, then maybe they'll do appalling things knowing they don't face elections again. But if we don't pay them too much, why would you go into politics to make a deal of yourself?
It depends on the dividend afterwards.
Yeah, possibly. And again, that comes back to money in politics.
Do you think if it was an independent online newspaper, and there are a lot of ifs in this question, it didn't depend on advertising, that had a benevolent investor, that you could change journalism through that method? Is there sort of optimism that is starting to happen?
So the question, if you didn't hear, was, can benevolent philanthropy sort of kickstart good journalism again? I'm not sure, I'm not sure whether you're on the payroll of the Global Mail or not. But look, I think the answer is it can't hurt. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, the reality is the main thing that the broadsheet newspaper has that no website has is the credibility of the printed page and the incredibly exaggerated circulation figures that come from people buying it every day and never reading it. So I don't think that the Global Mail or any of the sort of online sort of startups will inevitably take over those things. People said Crikey would never last. I used to really loathe it, and I think it's turned into something quite useful. But it doesn't look like it's in any way challenging the broadsheets, but hey, the broadsheets might fall over regardless. So then the question is, well, who's Johnny on the spot to take advantage of that opportunity? So look, I think it's really interesting and useful. I think that that diversity, actually is good for a number of reasons. It distributes power and it creates incentive to get the best story and to talk most effectively to your readers. But I think, there was a fascinating incident with the New York Times recently. The online editor did a little survey of the readership. I don't know if anyone knows this story, it's hilarious. The online editor of the New York Times asked the readers a simple question. Do you think we should check that what politicians say is true before we publish it? And he just thought he was asking an interesting, thought-provoking question. And the readership went apoplectic. They went berserk, saying, for words we can type but not say, what on earth am I paying you money for? What do you think your job is? What have I been reading for the last 20 years? You're asking me whether you should have done the one thing I thought I was paying you to do. And you know, and it shows how out of sync the media sort of are with what they think their job is and what we think the role of the fourth estate is. Democratic foundation principle, blah blah.